You know, Sakura, there is something oddly comforting about a coin laundry at 2 in the morning. The hum of the dryer, the warm air, the smell of detergent. It feels like the whole world paused.
I kind of love it, Professor. Nobody judges you here. You can just sit and think. But why are we talking about food in a laundromat?
Because both involve the same thing, daily rituals people rarely think about until they change. And that is exactly where I want to start today. Home cooking in Japan is going through one of the most fascinating transformations I have seen in decades.
Home cooking? I mean, people still cook, right?
They do, but the way they cook, what they cook, and even whether they cook at all, everything is shifting. Let me give you the big picture. Japanese households are shrinking. More people living alone, more couples without children. The old image of a family gathered around a big shared pot of nabe is fading.
So, lonely hot pot for one?
Not lonely, liberated, some would say. A company called Ibarra launched a product line where each portion of soup base comes in a tiny capsule. 1 capsule, 1 serving. 3 capsules, 3 servings. It grew over 26% in the first half of 2025. And here is the clever part. When summers became too brutal for hot pot, they repositioned it as a stir-fry sauce. Same product, totally different meal.
That is actually genius. In the States, we just argue about whether cereal counts as dinner.
Cereal is a perfectly valid life choice, Sakura. But the point is this. Japanese food companies are designing for flexibility now, not just for a fixed family table.
Okay, so individual portions are booming. But what about people who just don't want to cook at all?
That is the second big wave. Uber Eats Japan just dropped its service fee entirely for members. You pay only for the food. Their message was essentially, delivery should not be a luxury. It should be your everyday partner.
Wow. In the US, delivery apps still feel like a splurge because of all the fees.
Exactly. Japan is trying to normalize it. And alongside delivery, frozen meal kits are evolving fast. One company partnered with Miyagi Prefecture, that is up in the Northeast, famous for oysters and wild herbs, and created frozen dishes using hyper-local ingredients. Oyster rice seasoned with Japanese parsley. You heat it up at home, and it tastes like a ryokan dinner.
So the frozen meal is not just convenient. It carries a sense of place?
Precisely. It is convenience layered with cultural storytelling. That is something Japan does exceptionally well.
Professor, what about health? I feel like every food trend eventually circles back to health.
You are right. And Japan is no exception. One of the most surprising hits recently is a malatang cup noodle. That is, a spicy, numbing Chinese soup. It sold over 10 million units in roughly 16 months.
A cup noodle? That doesn't sound healthy.
Here is the twist. It uses sweet potato noodles instead of wheat. Only 331 calories. Real Sichuan pepper. Real star anise. Authentic flavor, but a guilt-free calorie count. The development team intentionally refused to water down the spice level for the Japanese palate. They kept it real, and consumers loved it.
So, authenticity plus health. That combination seems like a sweet spot.
It is, and it reveals something deeper. Japanese consumers no longer accept that healthy food has to taste boring. They want both. No compromise.
But, Professor, all of this sounds expensive. I have heard prices are going up across the board in Japan.
You heard correctly. Muji, you know, the minimalist lifestyle brand, just announced price increases on 118 food items. Average hike, 11%. Frozen rice burgers, chocolate snacks, even their in-store coffee went from 100 yen to 150. Raw materials, logistics, labor, everything is climbing.
So, how do families cope?
Some fascinating new tools are emerging. A Danish startup called Too Good To Go just launched in Japan with Family Mart and some JR East convenience stores. You open the app, find a nearby shop with surplus food, onigiri, bread, desserts, and buy it at 20 to 70% off. Pick it up on your commute home.
That already exists in Europe, right?
It does, but Japan is the first market in Asia, and it is a meaningful cultural shift. Traditionally, Japanese consumers are meticulous about freshness dates. The idea of buying marked-down near-expiry food would have felt uncomfortable a decade ago. Now inflation is rewriting those norms.
So, necessity breaks the taboo.
Always has, Sakura. Always has.
One more thing. What is the business takeaway from all this? If someone listening is thinking about entering the Japanese food market, what should they know?
5 things. First, design for the individual, not the family. Household sizes are shrinking, and flexible portion design wins. Second, convenience is no longer a trade-off. Consumers expect convenience and quality and cultural meaning all in one package. Third, health and authenticity are not opposites. The brands that merge them are capturing enormous demand. Fourth, inflation is creating new consumer behaviors. Discount apps, surplus food platforms, and early movers have an advantage. And fifth, and this is the one people miss, home cooking in Japan is becoming a choice, not an obligation. The emotional value of a homemade meal has not disappeared. In a recent survey, home-cooked food ranked as the 3rd most desired gift from a romantic partner. Above gadgets, above experience tickets.
Really? Homemade food as a gift?
12% of men in their 20s through 40s said it was what they wanted most, after fashion accessories and alcohol. In a world of delivery apps and frozen gourmet, the act of cooking for someone still carries deep emotional weight.
That is beautiful, actually.
It is. Japan's kitchen is changing, Sakura. But the heart of it, the idea that food is care made visible, that part stays.
I think I want to cook something tonight.
I would recommend against doing it on top of this washing machine.
Fair point, Professor. But at least the dryer could keep it warm.
You've been listening to Narrative Japan. Until next time, stay curious and keep listening for the whispers beneath Japan's economy.